I watched the first episode of Vice's new Tales from the Territory show. I enjoyed it. The first episode covered Memphis wrestling. This is not a documentary show. They don't flood you with talking heads. It literally are a bunch of legends from that particular territory sitting around at a table telling tales from the territories. The name is very accurate. The round table for this episode had Jerry Lawler, because you can't do a Memphis episode without Jerry Lawler. He'll be on the next one on Tuesday also, since that one covers his feud with Andy Kaufman. Jerry Lawler, Dutch Mantell, Jimmy Hart, Jeff, and Jerry Jarrett. And they had lots of reenactments similar to what you would see on Dark Side of the Ring that I think they add to the show very nicely. It gives you a visual beyond just looking at the five of them sitting around a table. Also, they shared the Waffle House knife fight story, and we'll end here. This is a very famous story, and there's newspaper clippings about it, so it did happen. Yeah, there's certain versions of how and why it all went down. But this involved Randy Savage, a young Randy Savage, back when he was still working for his father's promotion, ICW. And they were at a Waffle House. And somebody came into the Waffle House and started yelling that, "I'm getting married!" And it turned out to be one of the employees who was off that night, but he wanted to come in and share the good news and let all of his friends and his colleagues know. So the waitress that was working Randy's table leaves to go hug the guy and congratulate him, and Savage is in no mood, right? Because he's hungry. He wants to fucking eat. He hears all of this going on, and Savage yells, because the guy's like, "I'm getting married," and everything, right? And Savage just goes, "Who gives a shit?" And, oh boy, okay, so now we're off to the races here. And anyway, this led to a fight. This led to a confrontation. The guy pulled out a knife. So Savage jumps over a table, and he grabs a butter knife. Now, he doesn't realize it's a butter knife. He looks down and says, "Shit, it's a butter knife. You're not going to be able to do anything with this." So they're kind of like fencing on top of the tables, and they hear police sirens in the background, and the guy takes off, and the police knew Savage from TV, so they're trying to calm him down, and you can't calm this guy down. God knows what he's all strung out on. So they can't calm him down. They tried to cuff him, and it ended up where they had to sick one of the police dogs, one of the canines on him. And Randy got a kick in on the dog, but all that did was piss the dog off, so the dog bit Randy on the ass, so now he's been bit by a dog and a snake. Anyway, that's the version of the story that Dutch Mantell has told and that they told on the episode. So I looked up the newspaper clipping, because there's a whole news article about this in the Tennessean from Saturday, November 25th, 1978. And I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to read the article to you. So this is coming from sources who were actually there at the restaurant and the cops and people who were on the scene. This is not just the wrestlers telling the story now. Took fight out of ring, police say. I'm just going to read this straight up here. Randy Savage, the champion wrestler who bills himself as Mr. Macho and performs with Macho Mania, apparently did not get enough action in the ring Thursday night defending his title. Hours after retaining his championship belt through disqualification against Dutch Mantell, Savage, according to witnesses and police, became embroiled in an altercation with a newlywed and several Metro officers. Before it was over, Savage, the Mid-American heavyweight champion of the National Wrestling Alliance, had locked horns with 3 Metro policemen and a Metro canine called in to assist the officers in their struggle. The bulky, muscle-bound wrestler who frequently feigns a maniacal frenzy in the ring ended with minor head injuries, a dog bite wound in one leg, and 3 charges of assault and battery in addition to a breach of the peace charge. According to an eyewitness, the disturbance at the Waffle House began when Savage and another man, who remains unidentified, got into an argument early yesterday morning. According to the eyewitness, who asked not to be identified, Savage's troubles began when the unidentified man wearing a large cowboy hat announced that he had just gotten married. The wrestler came in with another man, and they sat at the far end of the counter. This guy in the cowboy hat said, "Hey everybody, listen, I just got married." "Well, who gives a big shit?" Savage is said to have replied. "I don't care what you've done." The 2 men then reportedly exchanged several heated words, and the man in the cowboy hat finally said, "Well, if you're such a big man, you'll fight me." Oh, that's a bad idea. The two men who were seated at opposite ends of the restaurant started towards each other, the witness said, but before they reached each other, Savage slipped and fell on the floor. When he got up, the two men swung at each other, but both missed, and the man with the hat fell on top of the wrestler, the witness said. They then began scuffling and wrestling with each other. Friends of both men finally pulled them apart, and they began returning to their tables. But before Savage could get to his seat, the other man grabbed a stainless steel table knife from one of the booths and threatened Savage with it. Savage then reportedly ran around behind the counter and yelled at the other man, "I have a gun in my car." "Fine," the other man said. "You go get it and I'll shoot you with it." The two men then stood in a Mexican standoff for several minutes, yelling and cursing at each other before the new wife of the man in the cowboy hat finally persuaded him to leave. However, more words were exchanged between Savage and the other man, and he came back into the restaurant briefly before leaving. When the man in the cowboy hat left, Savage returned to his booth and sat down. Moments later, Patrolman Edward Dyes and Raymond Rader arrived at the restaurant. When we got there, he was still hyperactive. He was going strong, you might say. He was cussing everybody in the place, and we told him several times to stop, but he wouldn't. So we placed him under arrest for breach of the peace. But he would not go with us. He said he didn't think he had to because the fight had been the other guy's fault. We tried to explain to him that we were arresting him for breach of the peace and what he had been doing while we were there and not for the fight, but he still would not come. Finally, Sergeant S.T. Williams arrived at the restaurant, and when the three officers tried to handcuff Savage, another struggle ensued. "I never actually saw him hit one of the policemen," the witness said, but Savage was flailing around trying to keep the handcuffs off. "I know at least one of the officers ended up on the floor, but I don't know whether the wrestler knocked him down or whether he slipped." While Rader, Dyes, and Williams were wrestling with Savage, a Metro Canine unit arrived at the scene, and the trainer brought the dog into the restaurant to subdue Savage. You know, imagine if you're eating at the fucking Waffle House. This has got to be like early in the morning, like late night, early morning. You're just trying to have some fucking waffles, man. And this is going on. It actually probably was a hell of a show. They said we told him twice to lay down on the floor, and told him if he didn't, we would have to use the dog to restrain him. Rather than obeying the officers, however, Savage kicked at the dog, and the animal, still on his trainer's leash, attacked the wrestler, biting him on the leg. Finally, after macing and using their billy clubs on Savage, Jesus Christ, the officers said that they were able to subdue the wrestler. They took him to General Hospital, where he refused treatment, then to the Metro booking room, where Dyes, Rader, and Williams each charged him with 1 count of assault and battery. "He hit each of us at least 1 time, but it's not anything that we won't get over. None of us were hurt really badly. I've talked with him before, and he's always a little hyperactive." Savage, who could not be reached for comment last night, was released from custody after posting $1,000 bond. So that's more in line with the official story. That right there is a true tale from the territory. And that is the wild and craziness that was Macho Man Randy Savage back then. Sounds like the guy was being a dick, frankly, and Savage was right to get up in his face, but then he turned into a complete maniac.